I'm Connor Old, and welcome to my predictions for the 2023 Oscar nominations, the 7th year in which we've been doing this, giving accurate predictions now for the Oscar nominations, but of course the Oscar predictions. Already in this past awards season, I finished in the top 5% of Gold Derby users for the Golden Globe nominations, for the Golden Globes, top 10% when talking about Critics' Choice winners, which was my first time predicting that, but my specialty is the Oscars. We've been covering almost all the categories, the race leading up until this point, giving you updates, changing things, trying to predict things ahead of time, like maybe an Eddie Redmayne surge I predicted all the way back in November, stuff like that we've been sort of trying to figure out. But here they are. Here are my final predictions. If you're new to the channel, essentially for the past 3 months now, I've been predicting what I think is going to get nominated at the Oscars, breaking down each category in their own videos, except for a couple categories, which I'll go a little bit more in depth into in this video. So if you want a little bit more explanations as to some of my predictions, most likely you can go back to those videos and I will talk about the movies that I'm predicting in those videos, although of course things have changed. We just recently got the BAFTA Awards, which sort of threw a wrench into some of my predictions for sure, but ultimately helped me solidify what I think is going to get nominated here at the 2023 Oscar nominations. So without further ado, let's jump into things, starting off with Best Picture. So my nominees are Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Banshees of Inisherin, The Fabelmans, Tar, Elvis, Gun Maverick, Avatar: The Way of Water, All Quiet on the Western Front, The Whale, and Babylon. So the top 5 I feel pretty safe about. They've been getting in at places like Critics' Choice and PGA, although Avatar may be a little bit slightly less because of that sort of disappointment recently at BAFTA, but still I think that will be based on huge success and the success of the first film, and in a 10 expanded lineup, it will have enough technical support and appreciation to get it in for picture. So those top 7 I feel pretty safe about, and in that 8th slot I have All Quiet on the Western Front, which I've been predicting for a long time. In some of my bold predictions I predicted All Quiet on the Western Front would get 5 to 7 nominations, which people were surprised at, and yet here we are in a place where it can get 8 to 9 nominations. It got 14 at the BAFTA Awards, so it was very prevalent there. And in recent years, the Academy has expanded, allowing more and more international members within its group. And what has that resulted in? Naturally, international films being represented in Best Picture. Movies like Roma and Parasite and Drive My Car necessarily wouldn't have made it in the old Oscar system, but now are. This year you have All Quiet on the Western Front. Furthermore, in the past 4 years, Netflix has had a Best Picture nominee within that 10, even having 2 in certain years, like The Power of the Dog or Don't Look Up in the same year. This year, I think it's going to go to All Quiet on the Western Front. It's a huge international war movie. Hollywood likes the war movies, and then you have the international branch, which, based on BAFTA awards, has clearly really appreciated this movie, and the movie overperformed in terms of things like the long list at Oscars. So I do think it will be a well-appreciated movie. I think it's going to get a director. We'll talk about that later, but that 8th slot I'm pretty confident in based on its superb showing at BAFTA, its Netflix strength, and then also it being an established international film, not a Hollywood film. And I think the international members of the Academy will really rally around that film and show it its support. Then in my 9th slot, I have The Whale. It overperforming at PGAs was a sort of big first thing that helped me ultimately put it in my predictions. Then you have an actress like Hong Chau overperforming at SAG and BAFTA by getting a nomination. Of course, we already knew Brendan Fraser was going to get in, but the fact that Hong Chau has been showing up here, I think, is a sign of sort of overall strength of the film. And then, of course, it got in for PGA. And when you look at that PGA lineup, certain movies I'm leaving off, like Glass Onion or Black Panther, because the Producers Guild like to reward superhero movies. They've done that with Wonder Woman and Deadpool, and of course the first Black Panther. And that makes sense because they like movies that essentially make money. That's how producers make a lot of their money. They believe in that theatrical model, so they want to reward movies like Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which made a lot of money at the box office. But what was interesting was a movie like The Whale, which was a smaller kind of a movie, that didn't necessarily sort of fit the mold of the producers, which indicated to me that this movie has a broader sign of strength. Of course, it's getting in for adapted screenplay, it's getting in for 2 acting awards, and I think it's also getting in for makeup. So it has above-the-line support, it also has that below-the-line support in something like makeup. It's a divisive movie, but there's a lot of passionate voters, which when you're talking about the 8, 9, 10 slots, that actually helps. We've seen divisive movies like Jojo Rabbit and Bohemian Rhapsody get in this slot. So I think that ultimately The Whale will get in for Best Picture. Then in my final slot, this was super difficult to me, but essentially I went with the movie that I had the most nominations with in conjunction with some overall general support, and that's Babylon. Babylon has been sort of seen as a disappointment throughout the Oscar season, but if you look at its potential nominations and where it could or couldn't have got in, I think it's actually done quite well. Critics' Choice, it got a lot of nominations. There was a lot of support for that movie within the critics, and the critics don't overlap with the Oscars, but oftentimes they're indicative of it. Then you look at the BAFTA. Babylon got a lot of shortlists. Didn't necessarily got a lot of BAFTA nominations, but it still did okay. It did better than a movie like Woman Talking, for example, getting in the technical awards for production design, for costume design. So Babylon is actually a movie that, in terms of these shortlists and nominations, has done quite well. It's maybe disappointed overall because people thought, including myself, would be a clear Best Picture contender, but I still think it gets in for that 10 in a similar way that Nightmare Alley did last year, with the technical support getting about 3 technical nominations, and then maybe even a Brad Pitt for supporting actor, and then boom, Best Picture, that's 5. That makes sense for me. Damien Chazelle is a past winner. La La Land was nominated 14 times. Don't forget, they like Damien Chazelle and his films. They have to nominate 10 movies. I think Babylon sneaks into that 10th slot. This is a movie about Hollywood. The Academy is Hollywood. They're going to appreciate this movie more than any other group. And also, for me, it's a question of what's the other contenders. Could be Woman Talking, but it missed in Screenplay. So is it even a contender to win in Screenplay now? Not necessarily. So does that mean it's going to get in for Picture? Not necessarily. That movie's been campaigned very poorly. So that I don't think is going to help its chances. Then you have a movie like Triangle of Sadness, which could get in with an original screenplay Dolly de Leon sort of combination. But I am a little bit concerned that Dolly maybe doesn't get in, or Triangle of Sadness maybe loses out to After Sun. I'm not super confident in that. Where at the very least, I'm pretty confident costume design, production design, score, Babylon's probably going to get all those 3. And then maybe editing. And then maybe Brad Pitt for supporting actor too. And then that sort of rolls. I think the technical appreciation of Babylon and overall support will ultimately push it over the edge, rather than a movie like Triangle of Sadness or Women Talking, which really only have maybe an acting and maybe a screenplay, versus Babylon has those guaranteed technical support and appreciation. Best Director, I have Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans, Daniels, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Todd Field for Tar, Mark McDonagh for The Banshees of Inisherin, and Edward Berger for All Quiet on the Western Front. So for this category, pretty much every year, it lines up with the DGA nominees 4 for 5. 4 of the 5 DGA nominees ultimately line up with the Oscars, and then the Oscars do one little strange thing. And when you look at the DGA 5, the most obvious one that you can take out is something like a Joseph Kosinski for Top Gun Maverick, because he hasn't really gotten in anywhere else. And that makes sense because Top Gun is a very pro kind of America movie, so Directors Guild of America makes sense to appreciate him there. But ultimately, I went with Edward Berger, in part because of All Quiet's very dominant performance in the BAFTAs yesterday, but also because when the Oscars, what they've liked to do recently is nominate these international directors in that final slot. We'll see a Paweł Pawlikowski for Cold War. We'll see a Thomas Vinterberg for another round. We'll see a Hamaguchi for Drive My Car. And all 3 of those men were also nominated at BAFTA before they were nominated at the Oscars. Who was nominated at BAFTA this year? Edward Berger for All Quiet on the Western Front. Now you could also say maybe a surprise Park Chan-wook for Decision to Leave, but that film ultimately didn't do as strong as a movie like All Quiet on the Western Front. Plus, if you look at the past 10 years for directing, there's only been 1 year in which all 5 of the directing nominees also had an actor nominated for one of the categories. Because oftentimes we see a George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road, or Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, a movie that has technical appreciation but doesn't have acting appreciation. What's that movie this year? All Quiet on the Western Front. I don't think it's going to get any acting nominations, but all the other nominations, Todd Field has an acting nomination, Mark McDonagh, Daniel, Spielberg, I think they're all going to get acting nominations. So what's that 5th slot? It has to go to a movie, I think, that will not have an acting nomination, a technical appreciation movie. I don't think it's going to go to Baz Luhrmann. I guess it could go to James Cameron, but Avatar's been disappointing. For me, it's going to go to the international spot. It's going to go to a movie that's been overperforming and doing well in the technical awards, and that's All Quiet on the Western Front, so I'm going with Edward Berger. Then for Best Actress, I have Cate Blanchett from Tar, Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Viola Davis for The Woman King, Ana de Armas for Blonde, and Michelle Williams for The Fabelmans. So the top 3 here, Cate Blanchett, Michelle Yeoh, and Viola Davis, have been showing up everywhere in terms of Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, BAFTA. They're 3 legendary actors who have great respect within the industry, and I think that they're going to pretty easily get nominated. Maybe there's a big surprise like a Viola Davis for The Woman King, but the matter of the fact is I can't predict that just because she's been getting it everywhere, and she's a well-established actor who actually has been campaigning for this film and is a different kind of a performance for this movie. So while I think the movie has ultimately kind of disappointed in terms of its overall chances, I still think Viola gets in for actress. It's still being seen enough, and she's well enough respected. Then I feel like I have to go for Ana de Armas for Blonde. Clearly, we know that the Oscars like biopics and actors playing actors or musicians. This is a classic example of that. Ana de Armas is a rising star. I think she almost got nominated for a movie like Knives Out. Here's her chance for sort of big coming out statement. It got nominated at SAG, it got nominated at BAFTA, and ultimately when we looked at BAFTA, it's kind of hard to tell this year because they sort of did a split approach in which they had jury members select some people, and they also had the general voting public vote in some people. So the fact that Ana de Armas got in for BAFTA, personally, I don't think she was a jury pick. That's a very divisive movie, Blonde. I don't think a jury would go, wow, she was so great in that, and we like that movie so much that we want to reward it, in the same way they maybe did that for, I think, Emma Thompson or Danielle Deadwyler. So to me, because that SAG nomination for Blonde, which is, SAG is a populist group, why do they go for a movie like Blonde, which is very divisive and NC-17 and kind of difficult to watch? Because they really like Ana de Armas. In the same way BAFTA went for Ana de Armas there, I don't think she was a jury pick. I think that was a pure amount of support. So she's been showing up in the right amount of places. She's been campaigning very hard all season. If you follow her Instagram, she's been really going out there, thanking the groups, going out to these different press events as well. So I think she's done enough to get herself a nomination. And then in my final slot, I went with Michelle Williams for The Fabelmans. We knew The Fabelmans was going to do well at BAFTA, so they disappointed there. I think some people think she could potentially go in supporting actress. Truth of the matter is, she should have gone supporting actress at the beginning of the campaign, but she wanted to go to the lead actress. Now she has maybe potential to not get nominated. But for me, this reminds me of something like a Kristen Stewart for Spencer, in which she was maybe the front runner early on. She had a lot of buzz and then didn't get in everywhere, but ultimately still made it in at the Oscars. And The Fabelmans, I think, out of all the groups, the Academy will like The Fabelmans more than the BAFTA, more than even Critics' Choice. This does seem like an Academy movie. Steven Spielberg, Michelle Williams. She's been nominated before without being nominated at SAG for a movie like Blue Valentine. I still think The Fabelmans is a strong enough movie to get her in for this final slot, and I don't believe that's the sort of maybe change potential category supporting actress. I think that's a little bit too late. I think Michelle Williams gets in here, and also it's in part because I don't really believe in Danielle Deadwyler for Till. She hasn't done enough campaigning as I would have liked her to do. She hasn't done enough sort of big speeches at some of these indie awards, and I don't see the overall passion for her film Till, so I think the passion of The Fabelmans is a little bit stronger to get in for someone like Michelle Williams. Best lead actor, I have Colin and Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Austin Butler for Elvis, Bill Nighy for Living, and Paul Mescal for After Sun. The top four are a lock. They've been getting nominated everywhere. And then the final slot, ultimately going with Paul Mescal. I don't feel super confident in it, but the truth of the matter is I don't know what else to put. I'm not going to put Adam Sandler for Hustle. I think that's a very populist, SAG kind of a pick, and I'd be surprised if the Oscars nominate him for that kind of a movie. I could go with someone like a Hugh Jackman for The Sun, but he hasn't really been campaigning for that movie, and the movie is very divisive and hasn't done very well, and it's pretty much been very lightly campaigned. So I went with Paul Mescal, whose screenplay of After Sun I actually think could surprise in here. But regardless, I think he has the international support, being an Irish actor, of course, getting in at BAFTA. I think that's a positive sign. And then also, he's recently signed up for a couple big American movies with Richard Linklater's 20-year Merrily We Roll Along film, and then also the lead of the next Gladiator film from Ridley Scott. So he's been getting a lot of buzz. He's a young actor, yes. It doesn't make total sense, but I think After Sun will have enough appreciation, enough fans, and in a weak sort of fifth slot, I think Paul Mescal has enough buzz, enough juice after that BAFTA nomination to get in. Supporting actress, I have Kerry Condon from The Banshees of Inisherin, and Angela Bassett, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Jamie Lee Curtis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Hong Chow for The Whale, and Dolly De Leon for Triangle of Sadness. So I think the top three are definitely a lock. They got in a BAFTA, they got it at SAG, they got Critics' Choice Awards, put them in. Pretty confident in that. Then I think Hong Chow is close to a lock in many ways because she did get in at SAG, because we've seen this resurgence in the Guild Awards, particularly at PGA, at SAG, of an appreciation of The Whale. I think Whale's getting in for picture, so I think there's going to be a little bit more of an appreciation for that film. I think Hong Chow, who is almost a co-lead in the film, she's in a lot of the film. She is the sort of best friend to Charlie in the movie. Of course, getting in at BAFTA and SAG and that overall Whale support, I think, brings Chow in. And then in that final slot, I went with Dolly De Leon for Triangle of Sadness, because I think the international support of Triangle of Sadness and her appreciation kind of reminds me of a Marina de Taviro, or even like a Yu Jun-yun from Minari, an international actor who we are really wowed by, and we go like, who is this? She's older, so she's got clear acting talent, and she's been doing it for a long time. And I think Triangle Sadness will have some passion within the acting branches particularly. So I think Dolly will be able to sort of push in there. And I really just don't want to go with the SAG 5 overlap. That pretty rarely happens, particularly in the supporting categories. So it would feel weird for me to put like someone like a Stephanie Hsu, particularly after she missed at BAFTA. And frankly, when we look at the supporting actor and actress categories, every year in the past few years, we've been getting two performers from the same film nominated in the same category. Rachel Weisz and Emma Stone from The Favourite both getting nominated, or Joe Pesci and Al Pacino from The Irishman both getting nominated. But it's very rare where we get two nominations from one movie in both supporting actor and supporting actress. As a matter of fact, it hasn't happened in both supporting actor and best supporting actress. You have to go all the way back to 1959 for Anatomy of a Murder with George C. Scott and Arthur O'Connell. And then you have Susan Corner and Juanita Moore, who got nominated for Imitation of Life. So that's all the way back in 1959. It'd be pretty surprising if Stephanie Hsu and Jamie Lee Curtis got nominated, and then also Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson and Barry Keoghan in supporting actor category. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Stephanie Hsu is too young of an actress, too much of a new face, and I think they're going to want to do a little bit more of a spreading out of the votes, so I think Stephanie Hsu ultimately misses out. Then Best Supporting Actor, I have Ke Quan for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Brendan Gleeson for The Banshees of Inisherin, Barry Keoghan for The Banshees of Inisherin, Paul Dano for The Fabelmans, and Brad Pitt for Babylon. So the top three are a lock after SAG, Critics' Choice Awards, and BAFTA, that trifecta of nominations. And I think the last two slots are a mystery. I think Eddie Redmayne makes the most logical sense, getting in at SAG, getting in at BAFTA. But I just can't really get on the board of The Good Nurse train. Even though I predicted it back in November, there's something to it where it just feels like too critically divisive of a movie, too lacklusterly campaigned, and I don't think that the support of the movie of The Good Nurse will be enough to push it over the edge, particularly when we're talking about the supporting actor categories. We've seen actors like Jared Leto from House of Gucci miss out because their films were super well liked. In the supporting categories, it really helps to have a film that's well liked. So am I going to pick a movie like The Good Nurse over a movie like Paul Dano and The Fabelmans? I'm not. So that was my sort of fourth slot, was to go with Paul Dano for The Fabelmans, because I do think it will overperform at the Academy versus some of the award ceremonies. He's almost a co-lead in the film. He's a well-respected actor now, working for 15 years. I think certain, accumulations of, oh yeah, I really liked him in The Batman and Love and Mercy and There Will Be Blood and Prisoners. He has this sort of great resume now where I think that he's now finally given a really great chance, a really great role in a Spielberg movie, essentially a co-lead. He seems like one of those guys who's finally deserved a nomination in the same way Jesse Plemons finally got that nomination. He's just been everywhere. I think Paul Dano similarly rides that support of a well-liked movie, in this case of The Fabelmans. And then on my last slot, I went with Brad Pitt for Babylon. He got shortlisted at BAFTA, so it's not a crazy thing to say. He didn't get at SAG, but Babylon did get in for ensemble, so there's clearly some support there. I think post-Golden Globes, he actually got a bit of a bump because people are always talking about him and how handsome he was and sort of charming him up. And let's not forget, we've seen a lot of times winners in this category or winners at the Oscars, like Eddie Redmayne, win for Theory of Everything, and then the next year, The Danish Girl. Or Sam Rockwell, win for Three Billboards, and the next year get kind of a surprise nomination for Vice. This is Brad Pitt's first Oscar movie since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in which he won. He's playing an actor, which I think the actors will appreciate. He's almost a co-lead in the film. He is in a lot of the movie. I think enough appreciation of Brad as an actor that gave him the win for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I think an overperformance of Babylon, a movie about Hollywood with the Hollywood group, the Academy, I think will overperform. Something about, it doesn't make logical sense always to not predict an actor like Eddie Redmayne based on the precursors, but I think Babylon will overperform, and I think Brad Pitt will have some of that post-win juice going for him and get him a nomination. Then for Best Adapted Screenplay, I have Women Talking, The Whale, Living, Glass Onion, All Quiet on the Western Front. So, surprising misses at BAFTA for Women Talking and Glass Onion, although that's not scaring me away from nominating them. I still think they both get in. Women Talking has been winning a lot of screenplay awards, including something like Critics' Choice, even though the movie hasn't been doing super well, at the very least has been getting nominations, and I think the Academy will more appreciate Women Talking versus a group like BAFTA, which even at the long list sort of indicate that they didn't really like the film. And then Glass Onion, still got that PGA nom, so it still has some support. I'd be surprised if it doesn't get in Screenplay in just a week or a year, because what else am I going to put in here? She Said did get the BAFTA nomination, but it's been very poor within the States and not very well recognized, and has lost a lot of momentum. So I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be Top Gun Maverick, because that's a big spectacle movie. They very rarely recognize those for screenplay. And then you have a movie like The Whale, which has been getting in everywhere. It's very writerly, lots of speeches, so I think that will appreciate. Even though this branch doesn't love plays, I think The Whale's getting for picture, so I still think there's enough support for the movie, especially in a weak category. Then I have Living, which is Kazuo Ishiguro, incredible novelist, well-respected, a writer, now doing a screenplay for a movie that I expect to be well liked and get an acting nomination, and the screenplay acting nominations are very critical, and I think it's a stronger film than something like She Said, and has stronger talent behind it. And then my final slot, I did go with All Quiet on the Western Front, because it did get in at BAFTA, because it's been overperforming everywhere, and it reminds me of a movie like 1917 getting in for screenplay. Then for Best Original Screenplay, I have Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Banshees of Inisherin, The Fabelmans, Tar, and Triangle of Sadness. So these 5 got in for BAFTA. The top 4 got in at Critics' Choice. The sort of final slot there went to Aftersun. So I think it's Triangle of Sadness or Aftersun. But because I think Dolly De Leon is going to get in for supporting actress, and I think Triangle of Sadness could even get in for picture, I think it has to get in for original screenplay for its sort of witty satire versus Aftersun. A little bit more subtle, a little bit reminds me of a movie like 8th Grade, which ultimately didn't get in, or The Farewell, which didn't get in. It's a little bit too small, it's a little bit too indie, whereas Triangle of Sadness is a biting satire from an established international director. Makes sense to give him the support there, particularly the international support from the Academy. I think will pull for it. Best Cinematography, I have Top Gun Maverick, Elvis, The Batman, Empire of Light, and All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, the American Society of Cinematographers Guild was a big surprise to me once it happened. A lot of our frontrunners didn't even show up, but we have to sort of evolve and adapt based on the American Society of Cinematographers, which is a very accurate guild, and then the British Society of Cinematographers, and then BAFTA. They've actually been pretty consistent in nominating these films. So, I have Top Gun Maverick, which has been getting in everywhere. Strange that didn't get in at the British Society of Cinematographers, but Claudio Miranda didn't get in for Life of Pi when he won for that film. So the movie is still, I think, super strong, getting in at BAFTA and ASC, and I think it will ultimately win. Then you have Elvis, which has also gone in and has that sort of flashy camera work, so it makes sense. The Batman, Greg Fraser, is a cinematographer's favorite. He actually won the ASC for Lion. Of course, he won the Oscar and the ASC for Dune last year, so I think that kind of positive buzz for the film carries over. Empire of Light, Roger Deakins, one of the greatest cinematographers of all time and highly respected, so even though the movie I don't think will be well liked, and it's disappointing that it missed out at BSC, it still got in at ASC and BAFTA. That's enough for me to put it in. And then my final slot, All Quiet on the Western Front, because of the strength of the film, doing at BAFTA, but then also getting it at the British Society of Cinematographers, where it was eligible. Very sort of impactful movie, clean style. I think that will be appreciated. And in my cinematography video, I talked about how there's an average over the past 10 years of 2.8 out of the 5 nominees being past nominees. So they like to nominate the same guys over and over again. And when I look at this, so essentially an average of 3 out of 5 are past nominees. And I look at this, Empire of Light, past nominee, The Batman, past nominee, Top Gun Maverick, past nominee, but Elvis and All Quiet on the Western Front, 2 newbies. Makes perfect sense to me. I'm actually surprisingly kind of confident in this 5, despite the sort of craziness that I thought even earlier in the week. Best Editing, I have Top Gun Maverick, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Elvis, Avatar, The Way of Water, and The Banshees of Inisherin. So that top 3, Top Gun, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Elvis, have been pretty much showing up everywhere. BAFTA, Critics' Choice Awards, makes sense. Top Gun is that action movie. It has a correlation with sound. Actually, all 3 of them have a correlation in my predictions with best sound. There's a correlation between the best sound category and the best editing category. Oftentimes the winners overlap, but oftentimes many of the nominees overlap too. So it makes sense that I have these in. I also have them in for sound, so there's a correlation there. But they all make sense as sort of rapidly edited, colorful, edited, noticeable editing kind of nominations, at least for those first 3. Then Avatar, The Way of Water. For me, it was either Avatar or Babylon. It concerns me that Avatar had 4 editors. I think that's sort of making editors hesitant versus a movie like Babylon, which has only 1 editor, and Tom Cross. But Tom Cross didn't get in for No Time to Die. He didn't get in for First Man, even though he got BAFTA nominations for that. So the fact that Babylon didn't even get a BAFTA nomination, even though they really like Tom Cross, It indicates to me that they probably won't give it to him for the Oscar. But Avatar: The Way of Water, I compare Avatar and Babylon in this slot because for me, this is the 3-hour movie slot. They like to reward editing awards to movies like Irishman and Dune and The Revenant, these 2-hour, 2.5-hour, 3-hour plus movies that are sort of epic. And there's appreciation of sort of tackling all that material, and that there's a lot of editing because the movie is long. So even though Avatar has disappointed in terms of BAFTA, it did get in editing at Critics' Choice. We don't have the Ace Eddie Awards to compare off of, but I think in terms of historical Oscar quote-unquote slots, the 3-hour movie is a slot that the Oscars like to reward in film editing. And I think Avatar, for being this big, epic 3-hour theatrical experience, will be appreciated there. And then in my final slot, I went with the Banshees of Inisherin, and every year we see a Best Picture contender overperform here. That's why we've seen movies like Spotlight and Moonlight get in for Best Editing and then ultimately win for Best Picture. It's pretty rare for you to win Best Picture and not get nominated for Best Editing. Coda did it last year, but it's definitely kind of a one-off, strange, last-minute surge kind of a movie. Most of the time, if you get nominated for editing, that's actually a strong sign for your Best Picture contender chances. So I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to win Best Picture right now, and it got nominated and I think it's going to get nominated for editing. But I also think the Banshees of Inisherin was going to get nominated for editing because it got nominated at BAFTA, which I think is a strong sign for that film. And right now, in terms of my top 2 contenders, it's the Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere All at Once. You could go for a movie like The Fabelmans if you think that's a stronger contender, but based on what we've seen, it doesn't have the overall support, it doesn't have the international support, it's not a super noticeably edited movie except for some of the editing scenes within the actual film. The Banshees of Inisherin is neither a super noticeably edited film, but I think based on the strength of the film, it will ultimately push over the edge and give it that nomination. Plus, it got nominated at BAFTA, where it didn't necessarily need to get nominated, but still did, so I think that's more of a sign of support. It reminds me of Martin McDonagh's last film, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Not super flashy editing, but a strong film, and that got in for Best Editing, so watch out for the Banshees of Inisherin. I think it's going to get in. Best Costume Design, I have Elvis, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, Babylon, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and The Woman King. So the top 3 of Elvis, Mrs. Harris, and Babylon feel safe to me. Elvis, done by Catherine Martin, who is the wife of Baz Luhrmann. The movie has gotten in everywhere. CCA, BAFTA, Costume Designer Guild, period piece. Makes total sense to me. Babylon has Mary Zophres, who was a 3-time nominee, got nominated Costume Designers Guild and BAFTA and Critics' Choice, so it has that support there. Big Hollywood epic, lots of different costumes and sets and dresses. That should get in. And then Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, I still feel confident in. Even though it didn't get a Critics' Choice, it got in at the Costume Designers Guild, it got in at BAFTA, both competitive races. And Jenny Bevan actually won last year for Cruella, and the movie is about costumes and dresses. Costume designers eat that up more than any other category. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, I'm pretty confident will get in. Then I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Even though it didn't get in at BAFTA, it was still shortlisted for a contender in Best Costume Design and actually won at Critics' Choice. This is still Ruthie Carter, who I think has more of a brand name recognition post-Black Panther win. She's not a branch necessarily absolute lock, an absolute favorite, but Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, I think, did get that PGA nomination, so it still has some appreciation. Angela Bassett could even win for that film, so it should show up somewhere. The technical awards make the most sense. It won for costume design for the last film, so I think it will get in. And then in that final slot, I went with The Woman King because historical epics do quite well in this category. You know, even a tangential movie like Mulan or Huntsman in the Winter's War, which I would still consider like kind of fantasy war, historical war movies. Even something like Mary Queen of Scots is kind of like a historical war movie. All those movies got nominated for costume design. I think The Woman King follows up similarly. It got in at Critics' Choice. It got in at the Costume Designers Guild. It didn't get in for BAFTA. But when I consider some of the other nominees, they don't jump out to me like, oh, this is definitely going to get in. I think The Woman King will do a little bit better with the American Academy, and I think Gersha Phillips will get nominated here for costume design. It makes sense. Best Production Design, I have Babylon, Elvis, All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, and The Fabelmans. So Babylon and Elvis got in at Critics' Choice and BAFTA, both extravagant period pieces. They'll definitely get nominated. Then I'm going with All Quiet on the Western Front because it, of course, got in at BAFTA, and it actually showed up at the Art Directors Guild, so a sign of support there, in which All Quiet on the Western Front had kind of maybe hit or miss support with the guilds, but it did get nominated there at the Art Directors Guild, so a sign of support there for production design. Plus war movies like 1917 and Dunkirk, have gone in for production design. So if we think All Quiet on the Western Front is a Best Picture contender and Best Director and Screenplay the same way I do, it should get in for production design. Then I went with Avatar. The first movie, of course, won and was a big deal the first time around. So there may be sort of some sickness of this second film in the sense that, oh, you didn't really do much. It's essentially the same thing again, the same world. That being said, I think the fact that they introduced this whole new kingdom and this whole new village of the different types of species, it's not just the Na'vi, it's now this lighter teal blue aliens with the larger swimming arms. And it was shortlisted at BAFTA. It got Critics' Choice. It's still technical Marvel. I still think that they're going to appreciate Avatar. And they have been appreciating fantasy movies like Dune and Black Panther recently, so I think Avatar kind of fits into that slot really nicely. And then my final slot, I went with The Fabelmans. And while I think The Fabelmans is still going to underperform in the sense that it's not going to get in for costumes or something like that, I still think it's going to get in for a category like production design here. Because while The Fabelmans, Spielberg didn't get shortlisted at BAFTA, Dano didn't get shortlisted at BAFTA, costumes didn't get shortlisted at BAFTA, production design did get shortlisted at BAFTA. So clearly, at least with the international group, the strongest technical support for Fabelmans came through the production design. This is also done by Rick Carter and Karen O'Hara, who Rick Carter has won 2 Oscars, Karen O'Hara has won 1 Oscar for 3 different films. A lot of respect for these 2 production designers. It got in at the Critics' Choice Awards, so there's support there. It got in at the Art Directors Guild. It's shortlisted for BAFTA. I think the film is going to be generally well liked, and it can overperform in a category like this. And I'm not going with the #1 movie on Gold Derby right now, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, because I think it actually should have won Critics' Choice if it had any strength. It didn't. It wasn't even shortlisted at BAFTA, and I think that ultimately hurts it. And I think that the CGI water elements aren't as impressive as something like an Avatar: Way of Water, so I'd be skeptical of a movie like Black Panther getting in. Then for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, I have The Whale, Elvis, The Batman, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Blonde. So the top 3 got in everywhere. They all have some sort of prosthetic element and makeup tied to an actor, 2 of which will be nominated in Brendan Fraser for The Whale and Austin Butler for Elvis, but then Colin Farrell also has prosthetics in The Batman, and we know prosthetics tied to an acting award nomination is pretty key. Then I have All Quiet on the Western Front because I think, I don't have it in every category, but this one makes sense to me because of the sort of content of the film, the sort of dirt and the grime, and a movie like 1917 did get nominated in this category, and of course it did get nominated at BAFTA, so I think that's enough support for me to push it over the edge. Thought about a movie like Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, but was a little bit more skeptical over the sort of blend of makeup versus CGI. And then ultimately I went with Blonde as my spoiler in that 5th slot because, like I mentioned, oftentimes the makeup nomination is tied to an acting nomination. I have Ana de Armas getting in for acting, so I have Blonde getting in for makeup and hairstyling. And of course, you have that transformation of Ana de Armas to turn into Marilyn Monroe with that classic hairstyle, but then also, makeup and the black mole as well. It's very iconic, so I think there'll be appreciation there. And it got in for the Makeup and Hairstyling Guild Award, so and shortlisted at BAFTA. Didn't get nominated, which I was a little surprised. I was hoping maybe it would, but I still have faith in Blonde. Best score, I have Babylon, The Fabelmans, Pinocchio, Women Talking, and The Banshees of Inisherin. This is admittedly a cowardly pick, just based on the fact that in the past 12 years, there's never been a year in which 5 of the 5 nominees were past nominees. They often like to nominate a first-time nominee, like a Hildur Guðnadóttir for Joker, or Ludwig Göransson for Black Panther. But all these guys have been nominated before. But the truth of the matter is why I went with this 5 is because I don't know who the first-time nominee is going to be. I guess it could be Everything Everywhere All at Once or All Quiet on the Western Front, which got in at BAFTA. But I don't necessarily know which one to sort of pull out. I still think The Fabelmans is John Williams. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get nominated for a super well-liked movie in The Fabelmans, because John Williams is a multiple-time winner, multiple-time nominee, super well appreciated, particularly within the Academy, so I think he's definitely going to get in. And then I have Women Talking for Hildur Guðnadóttir, which didn't get in at BAFTA, but did get 2 Critics' Choice Award nominations for score in the same year, and 1 for Tár, and it's actually never happened in which a composer has gotten 2 nominations at Critics' Choice in the same year and gone on to completely blank at the Oscars. Johnny Greenwood gets Spencer in The Power of the Dog, he gets in for The Power of the Dog. So Most of the times, if you get 2 nominations, Critics' Choice, all those people ultimately went on to win get one Oscar nomination. So it's kind of a cowardly 5, but I just don't know what to take out for. Maybe All Quiet on the Western Front if you really think it's going to overperform. But if you think All Quiet on the Western Front's going to get in here, and makeup and hair, and production design, and visual effects, well, then you're predicting it to be the most nominated movie on the night. And I don't think that's going to be true. I think it's going to be tied with something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. It would be super surprising to me for the movie to super overperform and do 10, 11 nominations. That would be really surprising. I think it's going to do very well. Maybe not super well to get in places where it shouldn't in quote-unquote score. But if a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once is a Super Bowl-like movie, hey, maybe that surprises in score. I just don't know what to take out, so I'm going with those 5. Best song, I have Lift Me Up from Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Hold My Hand from Top Gun Maverick, RRR, Natu Natu from RRR, Ciao Papa from Pinocchio, and Applause from Tell It Like a Woman. Critics' Choice and Golden Globes went with this exact 5, so while I can see a J. Ralph surprise for the voice of Dustin Ash, who am I going to take him out? I'm not going to take out Diane Warren for him. She's a, expert campaigner, multiple time nominee. She always finds a way to get nominated. I think she's going to get nominated here, and I don't really want to go stray away from the 5 that showed up at Critics' Choice and Globes. Best Sound, I have Top Gun Maverick, Elvis, All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. So the top 4 got in at the Cinema Audio Society and BAFTA, so pretty confident in that. So with that last slot, I went with Everything Everywhere All at Once, because while it didn't get nominated at the Cinema Audio Society, it got the most nominations at the Motion Picture Sound Editors. So I thought that was very telling, that was very important. And in that final slot, who knows who it could go to? It could go for The Batman, because that got nominated at the Cinema Audio Society, but The Batman didn't get nominated at BAFTA. Tar got nominated at BAFTA, so there's no clear kind of consensus 5. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is a well-liked movie, will sort of overperform in the same way that Power of the Dog overperformed last year, or Roma has overperformed in years past, and will overperform with a sound nomination. And then, of course, I'm also predicting it to get nominated for Best Editing, so I think making a prediction here for sound also makes clear sense, because that connection between those categories. Then for Best Visual Effects, I have Avatar: The Way of Water, Top Gun Maverick, The Batman, 13 Lives, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So those top 3 are locks with Critics' Choice, Visual Effects Society, and BAFTA nods. That makes sense to me. And then the next 2, I think, are anybody's guess. I went with 13 Lives because it had a very positive response to the Visual Effects Bake-Off. Amazon has been campaigning that movie very hard, so I'd be surprised if that movie blanks out completely. I think that there's an appreciation from the Visual Effects Society that it's a very kind of photo-real visual effects. They've awarded movies like 1917 and First Man in the past, which aren't these super big visual effects movies, but have more subtle visual effects that you don't totally see. The branch likes that, so maybe they go with a movie like All Quiet on the Western Front. I think there's a bit of a surprise here, and 13 Lives, because of that bake-off performance and because of how hard Amazon's been campaigning that film, including someone like a Ron Howard. And then Doctor Strange, I think it's going to get in. And this makes no logical sense in the sense that it didn't get nominated at BAFTA, it didn't get nominated at Visual Effects Society, it didn't get nominated at Critics' Choice. It shouldn't get nominated. That being said, Marvel has a very strong track record, even going back to 2014, where if there's a Marvel movie, it's most likely getting nominated for Best Visual Effects. Usually only 1, but sometimes 2, in the case of last year with Spider-Man and Shang-Chi. But if you look at all those Marvel movies, whether it be Shang-Chi, or Infinity War, or Endgame, or the first Doctor Strange, they all have some sort of magic, some sort of mysticism to them. And I think that appreciation of that visual technique will ultimately push Doctor Strange over the edge. I'm not predicting, ultimately I'm betting on Marvel, because Marvel frequently gets in. I'm not predicting Black Panther, because the first film's visual effects didn't get in. And Doctor Strange, that movie, the visual effects did get in, and that sort of mind, world-bending kind of visual effects, very impressive, the magic kind of stuff from Marvel, which is this group has appreciated in the past. It's kind of an out there prediction. It doesn't make total logical sense, but I wouldn't be surprised if Doctor Strange gets nominated. Best Animated Feature, I have Pinocchio, Turning Red, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and My Father's Dragon. The top 4 have been getting in everywhere. I could see a Marcel the Shell snub because this animation branch maybe won't appreciate it totally, but actually the voting has changed in which all members can vote on animated feature, not just the animated branch. So I think that will help a more populist movie like Marcel the Shell, which got in a Critics' Choice and BAFTA and everywhere else, even doing well at the Annies. In that final slot, I wanted to go with a movie maybe like The Sea Beast, which is kind of overperforming, or Wendell and Wild, because they like stop motion, but Wendell and Wild is a stop motion movie, and it's not just very well liked, so maybe the respective Henry Selick pushes that over the edge, but the stop motion sort of slots have been filled up with Pinocchio and Marcel the Shell, so ultimately I went with My Father's Dragon, which got a directing award or nomination at the Annies, is independent feature, which the independent features actually overperform at the Oscars, and this is a movie from Cartoon Saloon, which has never missed a nomination. Every time a movie's been out for Cartoon Saloon, it gets nominated at the Oscars. I'm not betting against that. I'm going with My Father's Dragon. Maybe a safe pick. I wanted to go maybe with an out there pick like The Sea Beast, but I wanted to go chalk here. Best documentary, I went with All That Breathes, Navalny, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, Descendant, and The Territory. So the top three should all get in based on BAFTA, PGA, and other critics groups. They've been getting in pretty much everywhere, but this group, you never really know. All the Beauty and the Bloodshed could get, surprise, miss. Fire of Love, I didn't predict to get in. I think that's a classic surprise miss because it's that archival footage kind of a documentary. Same thing with Mooney's Daydream. Then in the fourth slot, I went with The Descendant because Netflix usually gets in. As a matter of fact, if you look at the past 5 years, 6 Netflix documentaries have been nominated in this category, so they have a real stranglehold over it. And this year, Descendant did well with nominations at Critics' Choice and PGA and has that Netflix boost, so I think that will push it over the edge for a nomination. And then that final slot, I went with The Territory. Not super sure what movie to go with, but because this is from National Geographic, who have done well in the past with a movie like Free Solo, this has a lot of visibility because it's on Disney+, and it got nominated at PGA and even got nominated for a sound category at the Motion Picture Sound Editors Guild. So there's appreciation there. I think overall The Territory could be that kind of surprise, political as well. Best international film, I went with All Quiet on the Western Front, Argentina 1985, Decision to Leave, The Quiet Girl, and Bardo. So the top three have showed up pretty much everywhere. Of course, I predict All Quiet to get in for Best Picture, so that should get in. And then The Quiet Girl overperformed at BAFTA with an adapted screenplay nomination and also getting in for international film. It's a huge phenomenon in Ireland. A lot of people have seen it. There's a lot of support for that film. I think that makes sense here because this branch usually goes with the European movies, and we already have an Argentinian film and then a South Korean film, so will they really want to go for maybe a Pakistani film like Joyland? Usually they like to go European, so I wanted to go with The Quiet Girl here, and then in that final slot, Bardo. The truth of the matter is, this is Alejandro Iñárritu. This is a 2-time directing award winner, a Best Picture award winner, well respected within the Academy. Is his film not even going to get nominated for international feature? It got nominated at Critics' Choice Awards. It got longlisted at BAFTA for this category. It got an American Society of Cinematographers nomination. So it's been seen, and I think that's enough to push it over the edge for this category. Okay, now into the short categories, which I don't have a lot of analysis of. They're hard to predict anyways, but I want to give you my thoughts regardless and my predictions. So for Best Animated Short, I have The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, Ice Merchants, The Flying Sailor, New Moon, and Save Ralph. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse is based on a notable book and has been campaigned very heavily from Apple TV, so high visibility helps. Ice Merchants is being distributed by The New Yorker, who makes shorts widely available and easy to see, and often in this category, visibility is the most important, so I think this is going to be a widely seen film, uniquely animated film as well. The Flying Sailor is also part of The New Yorker, so it's easy to watch. It's also financed by the National Film Board of Canada, which got Affairs of the Arts to get nominated last year in the same category, and the directors of this film, their past 2 animated shorts got nominated for Oscars, so I think this will continue. The Flying Sailor, kind of a sneaky one that I'm pretty confident will get in. New Moon, this is starring and written by Colin Domingo and his husband, Raul Domingo. They've been campaigning very hard for this film. Of course, Colin Domingo is an established actor, not a super A-list star, but well-known and has been campaigning for the film, so that celebrity factor, I think, will ultimately help this movie get nominated. And then Save Ralph, because in this category, a classic rule is to go for the film that has the animal in it. The animal in this case being voiced by Taika Waititi, so it has a cute element to it, has this unique animation style as well, kind of stop motion-esque, and Taika Waititi has that celebrity factor, so I think ultimately people will go, oh, hey, short animated movie with Taika Waititi, I'll check that out. Visibility, high awareness leads to nominations. Then Best Documentary Short, I have The Elephant Whisperers, The Flag Makers, Nuisance Bear, How Do You Measure a Year, and Stranger at the Gate. So The Elephant Whisperers, Netflix has been nominated 6 years in a row in this category. This is the stronger of their two documentaries. It has a little bit more cinematic element, which I think will appreciate the Oscar voters, and it's also political, which the documentary branch appreciates. The Flag Makers is a National Geographic documentary, which is available on Disney Plus, about the diverse range of people that make American flags in the States. Very visible, kind of a hopeful ending. Nuisance Bear, this is from The New Yorker, which I mentioned has that high visibility and is easy to watch. The movie also won the Critics' Choice Awards for Best Documentary Short, and since the inception of that category, the Critics' Choice Best Documentary Short, every single one of those winners has gone on to a nomination at Best Documentary Short. That's an interesting statistic. I think that pushes it over the edge. Then I have How Do You Measure a Year from Jay Rosenblatt, who got nominated in the category last year, and this year, and this film is about chronicling the life of his daughter from the years of 2 to 18, so another sort of personal film for him, and I think voters already have this familiarity with Jay and his work, so I think that sort of continuation kind of the film and of his life and this personal documentary will be appreciated. And then Stranger at the Gate, which is another New York documentary that I'm betting on based on its visibility. It was mentioned on the Joe Rogan Experience, so I think that podcast, of course, has a lot of listeners, so if members of the Academy heard that, they may have gone and checked it out, about an ex-Marine that almost blew up a mosque, but stopped himself after meeting the members of the temple of the mosque. Then Best Live Action Short, I have Le Pupille, Warsha, The Right Words, Night Ride, and An Irish Goodbye. So Le Pupille, we have, it's a Disney short directed by the director of Happy as Lazaro, which was a Netflix international film, which got some awards buzz when that came out probably 4 years ago now. The movie's also produced by Alfonso Cuarón. Lots of campaigning, high visibility on Disney Plus. That should get in. Warsha won Best Short at Sundance and has been cleaning up at a lot of festivals, premiering at a lot of it. Very sort of dealing with modern issues of sort of gender identity, very cinematic, very critically acclaimed. I expect that to get in. The Right Words, which competed in Cannes, slightly more upbeat compared to the other nominees, so I think that actually puts it over the edge and has that Cannes festival kind of allure. Night Ride, another movie distributed by The New Yorker, tackles heavy themes in a comedic way, and I think the visibility of The New Yorker helps here. And then An Irish Goodbye, which is the only English language film of the bunch, which I think will make it stand out enough ultimately for people to vote for it. But that's about it, guys. Those are my predictions for the 2023 Oscars. Big video, so if you like the video, please like the video and comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. When Tuesday comes around and Oscar nominations morning happens, I'll give my live reactions to that and then upload that, and then we'll go on to what I think is going to win for the Oscars. That's a whole another race, but that will be a lot of fun regardless. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.